I never imagined that coming home from a job interview would lead to watching my stepmother hold my arms while her daughters tore my professional wardrobe to shreds. Janet gripped my wrists with surprising strength as Madison and Brooklyn ripped through my blazers, blouses, and pencil skirts like wild animals. The fabric made awful tearing sounds that seemed to echo through my childhood bedroom. "You dress like trash anyway." Janet laughed, her voice dripping with venom. "Might as well look the part now." I stayed completely silent, letting them destroy everything, while my mind raced to the sealed envelope from my father's lawyer, sitting in my dresser drawer. They had no idea what storm was coming. 6 months before this nightmare unfolded, I was living a completely different life in Chicago. My corner office overlooked Lake Michigan, and I had built a reputation as one of the city's most promising marketing executives. But everything changed when Dad called with news that still makes my chest tight. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months to live, maybe less. I dropped everything to move back home to Millbrook, Connecticut. The house looked exactly the same as when I left for college 10 years earlier, except now it felt foreign. Janet had slowly erased every trace of my mother from the rooms where I grew up. The family photos on the mantle showed only Janet and her twin daughters, as if I had never existed at all. Dad built Thompson Industries from absolutely nothing after Mom died when I was 8 years old. He started with a small manufacturing plant that made automotive parts working 16-hour days to keep food on the table. Janet swept into our lives when I was 12, bringing Madison and Brooklyn, who were 10 at the time. She presented herself as our salvation, a loving mother figure who would complete our broken family. What followed were years of careful psychological warfare that Dad somehow never noticed. Janet made sure I was excluded from family vacations, claiming there wasn't enough room in the car. She scheduled important family discussions when I had school activities, then acted hurt that I prioritized academics over family time. Madison and Brooklyn learned to mimic their mother's behavior, making snide comments about my appearance and dismissing my achievements as showing off. When I graduated valedictorian, Janet spent the entire celebration dinner talking about Madison's participation in the school play. When I got accepted to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship, she worried aloud about the family's financial burden. Every accomplishment was diminished, every milestone was overshadowed by something more important happening with her biological daughters. The twins coasted through high school and ended up at the local community college, where they barely maintained passing grades. Yet somehow they both landed executive positions at Dad's company immediately after graduation. Madison became Director of Marketing Communications, despite never having worked anywhere else, while Brooklyn assumed the role of Human Resources Specialist with zero relevant experience. During Dad's final weeks, I spent every possible moment by his bedside. The cancer had ravaged his once strong frame, leaving him barely recognizable. But his mind remained sharp, and we talked for hours about the business he had built, the employees who depended on him and his dreams for the company's future. That's when I started noticing irregularities in the financial documents scattered across his nightstand. Large payments to consulting firms I had never heard of, monthly transfers to marketing companies that seemed to produce no visible results. When I mentioned these discrepancies to Janet, she quickly gathered all the paperwork and assured me she was handling the business side of things now. "Your father doesn't need to worry about these details," she said with a dismissive wave. "Madison and Brooklyn have been helping me modernize our vendor relationships. We're saving the company thousands of dollars through their strategic partnerships." Something about her explanation felt wrong, but Dad was too weak to review the documents himself. I tried to research the vendor companies online, but their websites were sparse and unprofessional. Still, I had no concrete proof of wrongdoing, just a nagging suspicion that something wasn't right. The devastating truth revealed itself 3 days before Dad passed away. While helping him organize his desk, I discovered a hidden folder containing bank statements and canceled checks. The consulting firms receiving large monthly payments were registered to post office boxes in different states. The marketing company collecting fees for non-existent campaigns had Madison listed as its president and sole employee. My hands shook as I traced the money trail through months of documentation. Janet had been embezzling from Thompson Industries for over 5 years, using fake vendor accounts to funnel nearly $2 million into her personal accounts. Madison operated a fictitious marketing consultancy that charged the company for services never provided, while Brooklyn ran a bogus human resources consulting firm that collected monthly retainers for imaginary expertise. They had been systematically stealing from the business Dad spent his lifetime building, all while he lay dying in the bedroom upstairs. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, knowing that the people he trusted most had been robbing him blind during his most vulnerable moments. After Dad's funeral, I stayed in Millbrook to settle his affairs and figure out my next steps. My Chicago apartment lease had expired, and I had already resigned from my position to care for him. The plan was to spend a few weeks handling probate matters before deciding whether to return to corporate life or explore other opportunities. Janet's demeanor changed the moment we returned from the cemetery. The mask of grieving widow slipped away, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. She informed me that evening that she was moving Madison and Brooklyn into the master bedroom wing since they would be taking over more responsibilities at the company. I was relegated to my childhood bedroom with its twin bed and faded wallpaper. "This arrangement makes the most sense," she announced over dinner, cutting her steak with deliberate precision. "The girls need space to work from home, and you won't be staying long anyway. I'm sure you're eager to get back to your real life in Chicago." The psychological warfare began immediately, small things at first. My favorite coffee mug disappeared from the kitchen cabinet. The landline phone was moved to their wing of the house, making it difficult for me to receive calls. My mail was intercepted and opened before I could see it, with Janet claiming she was just trying to help organize Dad's affairs. Madison and Brooklyn seemed to take pleasure in my discomfort. They would blast music late into the night, making it impossible to sleep. They monopolized the main bathroom during the morning hours when I needed to get ready for meetings with attorneys and accountants. When I asked politely for consideration, they acted shocked that I would make demands in their mother's house. The cruelest blow came 2 weeks after the funeral, when I discovered Janet had been poisoning Dad's final impressions of me. She had convinced him during his weakest moments that I only returned home because I expected a large inheritance, not out of love for him. She showed me a handwritten letter in Dad's shaky script, expressing disappointment in his selfish daughter who abandoned the family for career advancement and only came back when money was involved. Reading those words felt like being stabbed repeatedly in the chest. Every late night I spent holding his hand, every conversation about his dreams and fears, every moment of genuine connection had been reframed as manipulation in his dying mind. Janet had stolen not just money from the company, but also the peace and love that should have characterized our final months together. "He was so hurt by your absence over the years," Janet said with false sympathy. "He kept hoping you would choose family over ambition, but you always picked work instead. At least now he knows where your priorities truly were." The twins escalated their campaign of harassment with increasingly bold moves. Madison accidentally knocked over my laptop while I was working on updating my resume, sending it crashing to the hardwood floor. The screen shattered completely, destroying months of work on my professional portfolio and personal projects. "Oops," she said with a smirk. "I guess you should have been more careful about where you left your things. Maybe you can get it fixed with all that money you're expecting from the inheritance." Brooklyn's approach was more subtle but equally destructive. She scheduled fake job interviews for me by calling companies and pretending to be a headhunter. I would drive an hour to Hartford or New Haven, only to discover that no interview had ever been arranged. The receptionist looked at me with confusion and pity as I tried to explain the misunderstanding. "I have no idea who would have called you," one HR director told me. "We haven't had any marketing positions open for months. Are you sure you have the right company?" The humiliation was excruciating, especially when Brooklyn would ask innocently about my interview that evening, then laugh when I explained what had happened. "That's so weird," she would say with mock concern. "Maybe someone is playing pranks on you. You should probably be more careful about who you give your information to." The family attorney Gerald Winters seemed sympathetic to my situation, but explained that legal matters were complicated. Janet legally owned 50% of all marital assets as Dad's surviving spouse, and community property laws in Connecticut favored her position. He assured me that Dad had left specific instructions about my inheritance, but the documents needed time to work through the complex probate process. "These things take months to sort through properly," Gerald explained during our first meeting. "Your father was very thorough in his planning, but there are multiple wills and trust documents that need to be reconciled. I promise you'll be taken care of, but patience is essential right now." Something about Gerald's demeanor bothered me, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what seemed off. He appeared nervous whenever I asked specific questions about Dad's wishes, and he always had excuses for why documents weren't ready for review. Still, he was Dad's longtime attorney, and I had no choice but to trust his guidance. The situation became unbearable when I overheard a phone conversation that revealed the true scope of Janet's deception. She was talking to someone late at night, her voice carrying through the thin walls of the old house. I crept closer to her bedroom door and listened in horror as she described her plans. "The little princess will be gone soon," Janet whispered. "Gerald is taking care of the legal paperwork and she'll get just enough to avoid a challenge, but not enough to matter. Robert was so confused at the end, signing whatever I put in front of him. She has no idea what's coming." My blood ran cold as the pieces fell into place. Janet hadn't just been stealing money from the company. She had been manipulating Dad's legal documents, probably forging his signature on revised wills and trust modifications. Gerald wasn't just slow with probate. He was actively participating in the fraud, helping Janet steal my inheritance while maintaining plausible deniability. The conversation continued with details that made my stomach turn. Janet had bribed Gerald with payments from the embezzled funds, ensuring his cooperation in the document fraud. She'd even convinced Dad's doctor to increase morphine doses during his final weeks, keeping him confused and compliant when legal papers needed signatures. He was so drugged up he could barely remember his own name. Janet chuckled. "Made it easy to get everything signed and witnessed. The stupid girl thinks she's getting half the company, but she'll be lucky to get a small trust fund and some personal items." I backed away from the door with my heart pounding, finally understanding the full extent of their betrayal. This wasn't just about money or inheritance. It was about systematically destroying every connection I had to my father and the life he had built for our family. The morning of my complete humiliation started like any other day that had become routine in hell. I dressed carefully in one of my few remaining professional outfits, a navy blazer and matching skirt that had survived the twins' earlier sabotage attempts. I had a job interview in Hartford with a mid-size marketing firm that seemed genuinely interested in my background. The interview went disastrously wrong from the moment I walked into their conference room. The hiring manager, a woman named Patricia, looked confused when I introduced myself. "I'm sorry, but we're not hiring for any marketing positions right now," she said. "Our HR department received a very strange call yesterday from someone claiming to represent you, saying you were desperate for any job and would work for half the standard salary. The caller also mentioned some concerning issues with your previous employment." My face burned with embarrassment as I tried to explain the misunderstanding. Patricia was professional but clearly uncomfortable, probably wondering if I was having some kind of mental health crisis. The drive home took 2 hours because of traffic, giving me plenty of time to imagine Brooklyn laughing about her latest prank. I walked into the house around 4 in the afternoon, emotionally drained and physically exhausted. The sound of laughter coming from upstairs should have been my first warning, but I was too defeated to pay attention to potential danger signals. I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom and opened the door to find absolute chaos. My closet had been completely emptied, with every piece of clothing scattered across the floor. Madison and Brooklyn were sitting on my bed like queens holding court, while Janet stood near the window with a satisfied expression. "Welcome home, princess," Janet said with a voice dripping false sweetness. We decided it was time for a wardrobe intervention. That's when I noticed what they were actually doing. Madison held a pair of sharp scissors, methodically cutting the sleeves off my favorite blazer. Brooklyn was tearing apart a silk blouse I had bought for my first corporate presentation, ripping it into long strips like confetti. "Stop," I said, though my voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Please stop destroying my things." "These aren't really your things anymore," Janet replied with a laugh. "Everything in this house belongs to me now, and I've decided these clothes are inappropriate for someone in your position." I moved toward Madison, hoping to save at least one blazer from destruction, but Janet grabbed both my arms and held me in place with surprising strength. Her fingers dug into my wrists hard enough to leave bruises, and her grip felt like iron shackles. "You're going to stand right here and watch," Janet hissed in my ear. "You need to understand your new place in this family hierarchy." Madison picked up my favorite dress, a black sheath that I had worn to Dad's funeral. She looked me straight in the eyes as she began cutting it into pieces, starting with the neckline and working her way down. The sound of fabric tearing mixed with their laughter created a symphony of cruelty that I will never forget. Brooklyn focused her attention on my professional shoes, using a box cutter to slash the leather uppers beyond any hope of repair. She held up each ruined pump like a trophy, inspecting her handiwork with obvious satisfaction, before tossing the remains onto the growing pile of destruction. "You dress like trash anyway," Janet laughed, tightening her grip when I tried to pull away. "Might as well look the part now. Maybe this will teach you some humility." The twins worked methodically through every item of quality clothing I owned. Blazers, skirts, blouses, dresses, even undergarments were systematically destroyed with scissors, box cutters, and their bare hands. They saved my interview outfit for last, taking special pleasure in ruining the clothes I had worn that morning. "Did you really think some fancy corporate outfit would impress anyone?" Madison taunted as she cut the blazer into strips. "You're nobody's special D. You never were and you never will be." Brooklyn held up the ruins of my skirt, examining the torn fabric with mock concern. "Such a shame about these expensive clothes. Too bad you'll be too broke to replace them once reality hits." The psychological torture felt worse than the financial loss. They weren't just destroying my clothes, they were dismantling my professional identity, my connection to the career I had built, and my sense of dignity as an adult woman. Each cut of the scissors felt like a wound to my soul. When they finished with my wardrobe, Janet released my arms and stepped back to admire their handiwork. The room looked like a textile explosion had occurred, with fabric scraps covering every surface. 3 hours of methodical destruction had reduced my entire professional wardrobe to literal garbage. "Clean this up," Janet commanded, "and don't you dare leave any mess for the housekeeping service to deal with. You made this bed, now you can lie in it." They filed out of the room, laughing, leaving me standing among the ruins of my dignity. I sank to my knees and began gathering the fabric pieces, some part of me hoping that maybe something could be salvaged or repaired. But the damage was too extensive. Every single item was beyond saving. That evening, they forced me to serve dinner while they celebrated their victory. I had to prepare their meals, set the table, and clean up afterward while wearing an old college sweatshirt and jeans that had somehow escaped the afternoon's destruction. "You know this arrangement works much better," Janet announced over dessert. "Dee finally understands her proper role in this household. Service positions have always suited her better than leadership anyway." Madison and Brooklyn laughed at their mother's joke, making plans for how they would redecorate my childhood bedroom once I was gone. They discussed paint colors and furniture arrangements as if I wasn't standing 3 feet away scraping their leftover food into the garbage disposal. The breaking point came when I overheard them planning to sell Dad's business to a competitor who had been circling for years. Janet explained that she wanted to cash out quickly rather than deal with the complications of running a manufacturing company. "We'll get 8 or 9 million if we move fast," she told the twins. "Then we can relocate somewhere with better social opportunities. Maybe California or Florida, where the weather is nicer and the people are more sophisticated." The casual way she discussed dismantling Dad's life work felt like watching someone desecrate a grave. Thompson Industries represented 30 years of his blood, sweat, and dreams. The employees weren't just workers, they were extended family members who had helped build something meaningful together. I retreated to my demolished bedroom and sat on the floor among the fabric scraps, feeling more alone than ever before in my life. The reflection in my dresser mirror showed a broken woman in ill-fitting clothes, surrounded by the evidence of complete defeat. But as I stared at that pathetic reflection, my eyes landed on the dresser drawer where I had hidden the sealed envelope from Dad's real attorney. The envelope that Janet didn't know existed. The envelope that contained information she had no idea I possessed. For the first time in months, I smiled. I waited until 3 a.m. to retrieve the envelope from its hiding place behind my old college textbooks. The house was silent except for the creaking sounds that all old homes make during the night. My hands trembled as I carefully opened the seal, revealing documents that would change everything. The first page was a handwritten letter from Dad dated just 1 week before his death. His familiar scrawl was shaky but legible, and reading his words felt like hearing his voice one last time. My dearest Dee, if you are reading this letter, it means I am gone, and Janet has shown her true colors. I pray I am wrong about her intentions, but I have discovered things that break my heart. I want you to know that every moment you spent caring for me these past months meant everything to me. Your love gave me peace during my darkest hours. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Dad explained that he had been fully aware of Janet's embezzlement for months before his death. The confusion and weakness from medication had been partially genuine, but he had been much more lucid than anyone realized. I hired private investigators to document the theft. His letter continued. I also had recording devices installed throughout the house to capture evidence of their conversations. Patricia Coleman is my real attorney, not Gerald Winters. Gerald has been bribed by Janet to help steal your inheritance, but Patricia has been secretly working to protect everything we built together. The next document made my heart stop completely. It was the real will properly executed and witnessed, leaving me 85% ownership of Thompson Industries. Janet would inherit the house and personal property, but she had no legal claim to the business at all. A detailed financial analysis showed that the company was worth almost $12 million, not the $4 million that Janet believed. Dad had quietly diversified the business over the past 5 years, expanding into new markets and building strategic partnerships that dramatically increased its value. Most shocking of all was a folder containing transcripts of conversations that Dad's recording devices had captured. Hours of audio documentation showed Janet, Madison, and Brooklyn openly discussing their embezzlement schemes, their plans to destroy my relationship with Dad, and their intentions to steal my inheritance through forged documents. One transcript particularly caught my attention. It was a conversation between Janet and Gerald from 2 weeks after Dad's funeral, discussing how they would minimize my inheritance while maximizing their own profits. "The girl is completely clueless," Gerald's voice said through the typed transcript. "She actually believes she'll inherit half the business. She has no idea that Robert signed new documents giving you controlling interest just before he died." "Make sure the forged will looks authentic," Janet had replied. "I want everything to appear legitimate when this goes through probate court. She can have a small trust fund and some personal items, but the real money stays with my family." Reading those words filled me with a cold rage that was somehow more powerful than the hot anger I had felt during the clothes destruction. They hadn't just stolen money or property, they had stolen my father's dying wishes and perverted his memory with lies and manipulation. The envelope contained contact information for Patricia Coleman, along with instructions to call her immediately upon opening the documents. Despite the late hour, I dialed her number from the phone in Dad's old study, speaking in whispers to avoid waking anyone. Patricia answered on the first ring as if she had been expecting my call. "I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry you've had to endure what you've been going through. Your father prepared extensively for this moment." Patricia explained that she had been working behind the scenes for months, coordinating with FBI investigators who were building a federal case against Janet and her accomplices. The embezzlement crossed state lines and involved tax fraud, making it a federal crime that would carry serious prison time. "We have enough evidence to prosecute successfully," Patricia said. "But your father wanted you to have the opportunity to handle this situation as you saw fit. You can proceed with criminal charges immediately, or you can take control of the company first and deal with them on your own terms." The choice was mine, and I knew immediately which path I wanted to take. Simple arrest and prosecution would be satisfying, but it wouldn't give me the psychological closure I needed. I wanted to watch their faces when they realized how completely they had been outmaneuvered. "I want to take control of the company first," I told Patricia. "I want them to experience the same helplessness they put me through." Over the next 2 weeks, I secretly prepared for corporate warfare while maintaining the facade of a defeated victim. I met with Patricia at her office, coordinating every detail of the takeover. I reviewed financial documents that revealed the true scope of Janet's theft and the company's actual profitability. Most importantly, I studied the corporate structure and employee roster, identifying people I could trust and those who had been complicit in the fraud. The picture that emerged was encouraging. Most of Thompson Industries' long-term employees were loyal to Dad's memory and had been suspicious of the twins' rapid promotions. Martin Rodriguez, the chief financial officer, had been with the company for 15 years and had quietly documented financial irregularities for months. He had been afraid to speak up without proof, but he had maintained detailed records of every suspicious transaction. Sarah Kim, who ran day-to-day operations, had similarly been protecting the company's interests while documenting the twins' incompetence and absenteeism. She had a folder full of evidence showing that Madison and Brooklyn rarely showed up for work, and when they did, they spent their time shopping online or planning personal trips. I arranged secret meetings with Martin and Sarah, revealing my true identity as the new majority owner and sharing Dad's evidence of the embezzlement. Their relief was palpable, and their eagerness to help me clean house was immediately obvious. "We've been waiting for this day," Martin told me with obvious emotion. "Your father built something special here, and watching these people destroy it has been heartbreaking. The real employees are ready to follow your leadership." Sarah provided additional documentation that would be crucial for the terminations I was planning. Madison and Brooklyn had violated virtually every company policy, from attendance requirements to professional conduct standards. They had also made discriminatory comments about other employees and had used company resources for personal expenses. "They've given us everything we need to fire them for cause," Sarah explained. "No severance packages, no transition periods, just immediate termination and escort out of the building." The most satisfying discovery was that every employee in the company knew about the embezzlement. The fake consulting companies had been obvious frauds to anyone paying attention, and the twins' fake work product had been a running joke among the staff. Madison would submit marketing reports that were obviously copy-pasted from internet articles, one employee told me. Brooklyn would send out HR memos full of spelling errors and completely wrong legal information. We've been covering for them and doing their actual work while they collected huge paychecks. By the end of my second week of preparation, I had everything in place. FBI agents were standing by to execute arrest warrants. Patricia had all the legal documentation ready to transfer company control immediately. Most importantly, I had a detailed plan for the most satisfying morning of my entire life. The night before my corporate takeover, I lay in my childhood bed surrounded by fabric scraps that I had deliberately left scattered around the room. Tomorrow, Janet and the twins would learn that their victim had become their destroyer. Tomorrow, justice would finally be served. I slept better that night than I had in months. Monday morning at Thompson Industries started like any other day for Janet and the twins, but it would end as the worst day of their lives. I arrived at the company headquarters at 7:30, wearing a borrowed business suit from Patricia and carrying a briefcase full of legal documents that would change everything. The building looked exactly as I remembered from childhood visits with Dad. red brick exterior with large windows that let natural light flood the manufacturing floors, a modest lobby with employee recognition plaques covering one wall, the smell of machinery, oil, and industrial processes that had always meant home and security to me. Security guard Tom Martinez recognized me immediately, though he looked confused about why I was there so early on a Monday morning. Tom had worked for Dad for over 20 years and had always been kind to me during my teenage years. "Miss D," Tom said with surprise, "I didn't know you were visiting today. Are you here to see your stepmom?" "Actually, Tom, I'm here to see everyone," I replied with a smile. "Could you please call Martin Rodriguez and Sarah Kim? Tell them the new owner wants to meet with them immediately in the conference room." Tom's eyebrows shot up, but he made the calls without question. Within 10 minutes, Martin and Sarah joined me in the main conference room, both looking nervous about this unexpected early morning meeting. "Good morning," I said, placing my briefcase on the polished wooden table that Dad had bought when the company first became profitable. "I'm officially taking control of Thompson Industries as of right now. Are you both ready to help me clean house?" The transformation in their expressions was immediate and profound. Martin actually laughed out loud with relief, while Sarah clasped her hands together as if she had been praying for this moment. "We've been ready for months," Sarah said with obvious emotion. "The real employees have been protecting this company's operations while waiting for legitimate leadership to return." Martin opened his laptop and began pulling up financial documents that revealed the stunning scope of the theft. "They've stolen almost $2 million over 5 years, he explained. "But the company's core business is incredibly strong. We've been profitable every single month despite the embezzlement." The revelations kept coming as more loyal employees joined our morning meeting. Lisa Thompson from accounting had been quietly documenting fake vendor payments. Mike Johnson from production had been covering for the twins' constant absences. Angela Davis from customer service had been handling client relationships that Madison was supposed to manage. "The fake marketing company never produced a single piece of work," Angela explained. "I've been writing all the promotional materials and managing client communications, while Madison took credit and collected bonuses. Brooklyn's HR consulting firm charged us $50,000 last year for a sexual harassment policy that she copy-pasted from a free legal website," Lisa added. "She made 3 spelling errors and got the state laws completely wrong." By 8:45, I had a complete picture of how the company had survived despite being systematically robbed. The real employees had been working overtime to compensate for the twins' incompetence, essentially running parallel operations to keep clients satisfied, while the thieves collected paychecks for non-existent work. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called for an all-hands company meeting in the main assembly area. Employees gathered with curious expressions, probably expecting another meaningless announcement about policy changes or productivity improvements. Janet, Madison, and Brooklyn arrived together looking smugly confident as they took seats in the front row. Janet wore an expensive suit that had probably been purchased with embezzled funds, while the twins carried designer handbags and wore jewelry that cost more than most employees made in a month. "Good morning, everyone." I began standing behind the podium where Dad had addressed the company for 30 years. "I'm here to announce some significant changes in our management structure effective immediately." Janet looked bored, probably expecting me to be introduced as some kind of minor administrative assistant. Madison was checking her phone while Brooklyn filed her nails with obvious disinterest. "As you all know, my father Robert Thompson built this company from nothing through hard work, integrity, and respect for the people who make it successful. Today, I'm honored to continue his legacy as the new majority owner of Thompson Industries." The reaction was electric. Loyal employees began applauding and cheering while Janet and the twins looked shocked and confused. Janet's face went pale as the implications began to sink in. "Our first priority is addressing financial irregularities that have been discovered through recent audits," I continued. "Martin Rodriguez, our chief financial officer, will present his findings." Martin stepped forward with a thick folder of documentation. His presentation was methodical and devastating, showing exactly how fake vendor accounts had been used to funnel money to personal bank accounts. Charts and graphs displayed the theft timeline with amounts and dates that left no room for doubt or denial. The fake consulting companies never provided any services whatsoever, Martin explained to the assembled crowd. Thompson Industries paid almost $2 million for work that was never performed to companies that exist only on paper. Employees began murmuring among themselves as they realized the scope of what had been happening. Some looked angry, others appeared relieved that their suspicions had finally been validated. Everyone kept glancing at Janet and the twins, who sat frozen in their front row seats like deer caught in headlights. Sarah Kim took the podium, next presenting HR documentation that painted an even more damning picture. Attendance records showed that Madison and Brooklyn rarely worked more than 10 hours per week, despite collecting full-time executive salaries. Performance evaluations revealed that they had never completed a single project successfully. The fake HR consulting firm charged us for services, including policy development training programs and legal compliance reviews, Sarah explained. None of this work was ever performed. Brooklyn would submit invoices for 40 hours of consulting work during weeks when she never set foot in the office. The most damaging revelation came when Angela Davis presented client communication records. She had been doing all of Madison's supposed marketing work while Madison collected credit and bonuses for achievements she'd never earned. Madison was promoted to Director of Marketing Communications based on campaign successes that she had nothing to do with, Angela told the crowd. She would show up for client presentations to take credit, then disappear for weeks while I handled all the actual work. By this point, Janet had recovered enough to attempt damage control. She stood up and tried to interrupt the presentation, claiming that there had been some kind of misunderstanding about family business arrangements. "This is completely inappropriate," Janet announced loudly. "These are private family matters that shouldn't be discussed in front of employees. Dee is obviously confused about legal ownership issues." I smiled and nodded to Patricia Coleman, who had been waiting in the back of the room with a briefcase full of legal documents. She walked forward and handed Janet an official court order, establishing my ownership of the company. "Mrs. Thompson," Patricia said formally, "this court order confirms that Dee Thompson is the legitimate majority owner of Thompson Industries, inheriting her ownership from her father's properly executed will. You have no legal authority in this company." The color drained from Janet's face as she read the court documents. Madison and Brooklyn looked between each other with growing panic, finally understanding that their comfortable world was about to collapse completely. The psychological satisfaction was overwhelming as I watched their confidence crumble. For months, they had treated me like a powerless victim who existed only for their amusement. Now they sat in a room full of people who knew exactly what they had done, with legal proof of their crimes being presented as evidence. "Effective immediately, there will be some personnel changes," I announced to the assembled employees. "Madison Thompson and Brooklyn Thompson are terminated for cause, including embezzlement, fraud, and gross misconduct. Security will escort them from the premises within the hour." The twins finally found their voices both talking at once as they tried to deny the charges and claim they had been set up. But their panic was obvious, and their protests sounded hollow in the face of overwhelming evidence. Janet made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "You can't do this," she shouted. "I own 50% of everything Robert built. You're just a spoiled child having a tantrum because you didn't get your way." I gestured to Patricia, who produced the real will along with documentation showing that Janet's supposed ownership had been based entirely on forged documents. The fake will that Gerald Winters had prepared was revealed as a criminal conspiracy to steal my inheritance. "Mrs. Thompson," Patricia announced formally, "you have no ownership interest in Thompson Industries. Your deceased husband left you the house and personal property, but this business belongs entirely to his daughter." The moment when Janet realized how completely she had been outmaneuvered was worth every moment of suffering I had endured. Her expression went from angry denial to shocked understanding to pure desperation as she grasped that her entire plan had collapsed. But the best was yet to come. The termination meetings were scheduled for 10 o'clock sharp, beginning with Madison in her corner office that she had never deserved. I arrived with Patricia Martin and 2 security guards, carrying boxes of evidence that documented every aspect of her fraud. Madison sat behind an oversized desk in a leather executive chair trying to project authority, despite the obvious panic in her eyes. Her office was decorated with fake awards and certificates from marketing organizations she had never actually joined, along with framed photos of herself at company events where she had shown up only to take credit for other people's work. Madison. I began formally sitting across from her like any other business meeting. We're here to discuss the termination of your employment with Thompson Industries, effective immediately. She attempted to maintain her usual arrogant demeanor, leaning back in the chair and crossing her arms defensively. "You can't fire me," she declared. "I'm family and I've been instrumental in this company's marketing success. You'll be hearing from our attorney about this illegal harassment." I opened the first folder and spread out documentation of her fake consulting company across the desk. Bank records showed exactly how much money had been stolen, and when, while corporate records revealed that no work had ever been performed in exchange for the payments. Madison Thompson Marketing Solutions received $743,000 from Thompson Industries over the past 5 years, I explained calmly. "Can you show me any work product that justifies these payments?" Her confidence began to crumble as she stared at the evidence. She tried to claim that her work was strategic and behind the scenes difficult to document in traditional ways. But when I presented client testimonials crediting Angela Davis with all the supposed achievements on Madison's resume, her lies became impossible to maintain. "This is all just a misunderstanding," Madison said, her voice becoming shaky. "Mom handles all the business arrangements. I just do what she tells me to do." The second folder contained recordings and transcripts from Dad's hidden devices, including conversations where Madison openly bragged about stealing from the company. Her own voice, captured on audio, described the fake consulting firm as free money from the old man's business. "Would you like to hear your own voice explaining how easy it was to forge invoices?" I asked, placing a small digital recorder on the desk. "Or should we skip ahead to the part where you and Brooklyn laughed about Dad being too drugged up to notice the theft?" Madison's face went completely white as she realized the scope of evidence against her. She tried to stand up and leave, but the security guards blocked her path to the door. There was no escape from this confrontation, no way to avoid facing the consequences of her actions. The final revelation was the most devastating. I presented her employment record showing that she had missed over 60% of scheduled workdays while collecting a full-time executive salary. Time-stamped security footage showed her arriving late, leaving early, and spending entire days shopping online instead of working. "Madison Thompson," I said formally, "you are terminated for cause, including embezzlement, fraud, gross misconduct, and violation of employment policies. Security will escort you from the building immediately, and you will not be permitted to return." Her composure finally broke completely. She began crying and begging, claiming that everything had been Janet's idea and that she had just followed instructions. But her tears felt like justice rather than sympathy, especially when I remembered her laughing while destroying my clothes. "Please don't do this," she sobbed. "I'll pay back the money somehow. I'll work for free to make up for the mistakes. This will ruin my life." "Your life," I replied quietly. "You spent 5 years ruining my father's company while he trusted you completely. You destroyed my clothes while laughing at my pain. You stole money that belonged to hardworking employees who earned their paychecks honestly. Your life was never my responsibility." Security escorted Madison from her office while she continued to plead and make promises she had no intention of keeping. Watching her box of personal items being carried away felt like watching justice finally arrive after months of delayed gratification. Brooklyn's termination in the Human Resources office was even more satisfying. As the supposed head of HR, she had violated virtually every employment law while collecting fees for non-existent consulting services. Her office was filled with legal reference books she had never opened and policy manuals she had never read. "Brooklyn," I began. "Your employment with Thompson Industries is terminated effective immediately for embezzlement, fraud, and gross violation of professional responsibilities." She tried to claim legal protections that didn't exist, threatening to sue for wrongful termination and discrimination. But when I presented documentation showing that her fake consulting firm had charged the company for services, never provided her legal threats, became laughable. Brooklyn Thompson HR Solutions billed Thompson Industries for $43,000 in sexual harassment training that was never conducted. I explained. "The policy manual you submitted was plagiarized from free internet sources and contained incorrect legal information that could have exposed the company to liability." The evidence against Brooklyn was particularly damning because she had been responsible for maintaining employment records that documented her own misconduct. Attendance records showed that she had been absent for entire weeks while billing consulting time to the company. Most embarrassing were the recordings of her making discriminatory comments about employees and bragging about how easy it was to manipulate company policies for personal benefit. Her own voice, captured on Dad's hidden recording devices, described older employees as dead weight and women with families as liability risks. "You have 30 minutes to gather personal belongings," I told her as security guards waited by the door. "Company property, including the laptop and phone you've been using for personal business, remains here." Brooklyn's reaction was pure fury rather than tears. She screamed about family loyalty and threatened to destroy me through legal action and public humiliation. But her threats sounded hollow when delivered by someone being escorted out by security guards. "This isn't over," she yelled as they guided her toward the exit. "You'll regret crossing our family. We have connections and resources you can't imagine." Janet's confrontation in the executive office was the emotional climax of the entire ordeal. She sat in Dad's chair behind his desk, trying to project authority in the office, where he had spent 30 years building something meaningful. The irony was perfect. She was about to be destroyed in the very room where she had planned my destruction. "Janet," I said, taking the seat across from the desk where I had sat as a child watching Dad work late into the evening, "your employment with Thompson Industries is terminated immediately. You will also be facing federal charges for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy." She tried to maintain her mask of innocent confusion, claiming that she had only been trying to help the company modernize its business practices. But when Patricia placed recording transcripts on the desk, Janet's pretense finally collapsed completely. "Would you like to read your own words about bribing Gerald Winters to forge legal documents?" I asked. "Or should we start with the part where you admitted to increasing Dad's morphine doses to keep him confused during document signings?" The moment when Janet realized that Dad had been recording their conversations was devastating to watch. Her face went through a series of expressions as she understood that every cruel word, every admission of guilt, every plan to destroy my inheritance had been captured on audio. Robert was supposed to die without knowing what we were doing. She whispered more to herself than to me. He was supposed to be too drugged to understand what was happening. "Dad knew everything," I replied. "He spent his final months documenting your crimes and protecting the company from your theft. You didn't just steal money, Janet. You stole his peace of mind during his dying days." The psychological satisfaction reached its peak when Janet finally dropped her mask completely. The fake grief, the false concern, the pretense of being a loving stepmother all disappeared, revealing the cold, calculating predator who had been systematically destroying everything Dad built. "You think you've won," she snarled with pure hatred. "You're still the same pathetic little girl who never belonged in this family. Robert only married your mother for convenience, and he only tolerated you because he had no choice." Her words were meant to hurt, but they felt like victory instead. After months of psychological warfare, she had finally shown her true nature to witnesses who could document everything for the criminal trial. Janet Thompson. Patricia announced formally, Federal agents are waiting to place you under arrest for wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit theft. You have the right to remain silent." The FBI agents entered the office as if on cue, with handcuffs and arrest warrants for all three conspirators. Janet's expression shifted from hatred to terror as she realized that this wasn't just about losing employment. This was about federal prison time and complete financial ruin. Watching Janet being led away in handcuffs from Dad's office felt like the universe finally restoring its proper balance. The woman who had spent years manipulating and destroying was experiencing her own destruction, delivered with the same methodical precision she had used against our family. The building erupted in cheers as employees watched their tormentors being arrested simultaneously. Madison and Brooklyn were loaded into separate FBI vehicles while Janet screamed about conspiracy and discrimination. But their protests were meaningless now, overwhelmed by documented evidence and recorded confessions. Standing in Dad's office after they were gone, I felt his presence more strongly than any time since his death. Justice had been served exactly as he had planned, with patience and preparation, triumphing over immediate revenge. 3 months later, Thompson Industries had been completely transformed into the company Dad always dreamed it could become. The executive floor buzzed with productive energy instead of the toxic atmosphere that Janet and the twins had created. Every morning brought new evidence that removing the cancer had allowed the healthy organism to flourish. Martin Rodriguez had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer, bringing both financial expertise and deep institutional knowledge to senior leadership. Sarah Kim became Vice President of Human Resources, implementing policies that actually protected employees instead of exploiting them. Their first initiative was a profit-sharing program that distributed the recovered embezzlement funds to workers who had been covering for the twins' incompetence. The company's financial recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. Without the constant drain of fake consulting fees and fraudulent expenses, Thompson Industries showed its true profitability. Monthly revenue had increased by 30% as employee morale soared and client relationships strengthened under honest management. Most satisfying was watching individual employees flourish when their contributions were properly recognized and rewarded. Angela Davis became Director of Marketing Communications, finally receiving credit and compensation for work she had been doing anonymously for years. Lisa Thompson was promoted to Senior Financial Analyst, her careful documentation skills proving invaluable for both the criminal investigation and ongoing business operations. The new company culture emphasized transparency and authentic achievement rather than manipulation and theft. Department meetings focused on collaboration and innovation instead of covering up incompetence. Employees arrived early and stayed late because they believed in what they were building together. Federal prosecutors had moved quickly on the criminal cases. Janet received 5 years in federal prison for wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy charges. The judge specifically noted the breach of trust during a vulnerable person's final illness as an aggravating factor that warranted the maximum sentence. Madison and Brooklyn each received 3 years in federal prison for their roles in the embezzlement conspiracy. Their fake consulting companies were seized by the government, with all assets being returned to Thompson Industries as restitution. The twins who had once mocked my professional achievements were now wearing orange jumpsuits in federal correctional facilities. Gerald Winters, the corrupt attorney, lost his license to practice law and received 2 years in prison for his role in the document fraud. His cooperation with prosecutors helped secure additional evidence, but couldn't save him from the consequences of betraying his professional obligations. The house that Janet thought she would inherit had actually been held in a trust that contained specific moral clauses. Her criminal conviction triggered forfeiture provisions that transferred ownership to me as the sole remaining family member. Rather than living there with all its painful memories, I decided to transform the property into something meaningful. The Janet Thompson House for Grieving Families opened 6 months after the convictions, providing counseling services and support groups for people navigating loss. The master bedroom where Janet had planned my destruction became a peaceful library where families could find comfort and resources during difficult times. Converting that space from a place of manipulation into a center of healing felt like the perfect conclusion to this chapter of my life. Every person who found comfort there represented a victory over the darkness that Janet had tried to spread through our family. The business community had responded enthusiastically to Thompson Industries' transformation. Client contracts that had been in jeopardy under the previous management were renewed with improved terms. New partnerships developed as word spread about our commitment to honest business practices and employee welfare. Industry recognition followed quickly. Thompson Industries received the Connecticut Manufacturers Association's Excellence in Ethics Award, specifically citing our commitment to transparency and employee empowerment. The award ceremony took place in the same hotel ballroom where Janet had once boasted about her plans to sell Dad's company to competitors. Most importantly, the company's employees had become a genuine family, united by shared values rather than fear and manipulation. Monthly all-hands meetings featured celebrations of individual achievements and collective milestones. The atmosphere Dad had always wanted finally existed, built on respect and authentic caring, rather than hierarchy and intimidation. I kept Dad's portrait hanging behind the desk in what was now my office, but I had moved his chair to face the window overlooking the manufacturing floor. Every morning, I could see employees arriving with energy and purpose, knowing their work contributed to something meaningful and lasting. The profound life lesson from this experience became clearer with each passing day. Dad's final gift wasn't just the evidence or the business ownership. It was teaching me that patience and preparation create more lasting victory than immediate revenge ever could. When Janet and the twins were destroying my clothes and mocking my pain, my first instinct had been to fight back immediately with anger and accusations. But Dad's example showed me that strategic thinking and careful planning could deliver justice that would last for years rather than moments. The woman who had once felt completely powerless while watching her possessions being destroyed had learned to wield real power through patience, evidence, and moral clarity. Every day brought fresh confirmation that choosing construction over destruction had been the right path. Thompson Industries now employed 47 people who earned honest wages through meaningful work. The profit-sharing program had allowed several families to buy their first homes or send children to college. The company's charitable foundation supported local schools and community organizations throughout Connecticut. During our first annual company picnic, I stood watching employees and their families enjoying games and conversations in the park, where Dad used to take me as a child. The contrast with the toxic atmosphere I had inherited was so dramatic, it felt like witnessing a resurrection. Martin approached me as the afternoon wound down, carrying his infant daughter, while his wife gathered their picnic supplies. "Your father would be so proud of what you've built here," he said with obvious emotion. "This is exactly the kind of workplace he always talked about creating." Sarah joined us with her twin boys, both wearing Thompson Industries t-shirts with paint stains from the face painting station. "The employees want you to know how grateful we are," she said. "You didn't just save our jobs, you gave us a place where we can actually be proud to work." Standing there surrounded by genuine smiles and authentic relationships, I finally understood the full scope of what Dad had protected through his careful planning. This wasn't just about money or business ownership. It was about preserving dignity, creating opportunity, and building something that would outlast any individual person's life. That evening, I returned to the office to review quarterly reports and prepare for the next week's meetings. The building was quiet except for the security guard making his evening rounds, but it felt alive with potential and possibility. I sat in Dad's chair and looked out at the manufacturing floor where tomorrow's work would begin early. The equipment hummed quietly in standby mode, ready to produce products that would serve customers and support families throughout the region. On my desk lay thank you letters from employees whose lives had been changed by the company's transformation. Angela's note mentioned finally being able to afford graduate school. Lisa's letter described buying her first car without worrying about monthly payments. Mike from production wrote about his son's reaction to visiting the factory and seeing where his dad worked with pride. The deepest satisfaction came from knowing that justice hadn't just been served, but that good had triumphed in ways that would create lasting positive change. Janet and the twins had been focused entirely on destruction and theft, but our response had been construction and growth, leaving the world better than we found it. As I turned off the lights and locked the office, I whispered a quiet thank you to Dad for teaching me that real power comes not from defeating enemies, but from building something so strong and good that it cannot be destroyed. The woman who had once been held captive while her possessions were destroyed now held the keys to a thriving business that provided security and opportunity for dozens of families. The transformation felt like emerging from a long nightmare into bright sunlight that would never fade. Thompson Industries would continue growing and serving the community for generations to become a living monument to the truth that patient preparation and moral courage will always triumph over cruelty and greed in the end. What would you do if you discovered your family had been systematically stealing from your inheritance while manipulating your dying parent? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know how you would handle such a devastating betrayal. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about overcoming family injustice, and share this video with anyone who needs to know that patient planning can triumph over immediate cruelty. Thank you for joining me on this journey of transformation and justice. May you always have the strength to choose construction over destruction, even in your darkest moments.